someone who rarely shows weakness, someone who always seems to have a plan, someone who appears emotionally unshakable. But honestly, the reading shows a completely different truth beneath the surface. Because behind that calm exterior exists someone who feels deeply, far more deeply than most people realize. And perhaps it is precisely because you feel so much that you learned how to protect yourself. Because disappointment teaches caution. Heartbreak teaches observation. Betrayal teaches patience. Experience teaches discernment. And the reading shows you living exactly in that energy right now. Not close to life, not close to love, not close to opportunity, simply careful, very careful. You observe before trusting. You evaluate before committing. You study situations before taking emotional risks. And honestly, there are good reasons for that. There is a specific situation appearing strongly. Someone close to you has been struggling to find their own direction. This could be a family member, a child, a sibling, a close friend. Someone whose happiness genuinely matters to you. The reading shows that for a long time you worried about this person, wondered whether they would find stability, wondered whether they would discover their purpose, wondered whether they would eventually stand on their own feet. And honestly, that concern has occupied more space in your heart than most people know. But something begins changing, slowly, gradually. The reading shows this person beginning to find answers, beginning to find direction, beginning to find confidence. And honestly, that brings enormous relief, because one of Capricorn's greatest sources of happiness is seeing the people they love become stronger. There is another situation that continues demanding your attention, something unresolved, something that seems frozen in time. Perhaps a family issue, perhaps a difficult relationship, perhaps a long-standing conflict, perhaps a situation that should have been resolved long ago, but somehow remains unfinished. And honestly, that frustrates you, because Capricorn loves solutions. You love clarity, you love progress, you love fixing what is broken. But this situation refuses to move according to your schedule. And that becomes one of your greatest lessons, because the reading repeatedly shows a powerful truth. Not everything responds to effort. Some things respond only to time. You have already tried understanding, already tried solving, already tried accelerating the process, already tried finding shortcuts, but now something changes. You begin realizing that some answers arrive only after we stop forcing them, only after we allow life to breathe, only after we allow situations to mature naturally. And honestly, that realization creates peace. There is another beautiful energy appearing, a desire for lightness, a desire for joy, a desire for simple moments. The reading shows your soul becoming tired of carrying responsibility every hour of every day. You want fresh air, new environments, interesting conversations, small adventures, moments where you can simply exist without solving problems. And honestly, you need that, because nobody can live entirely through obligation. Even the strongest people need emotional rest. Even the most responsible people need happiness. Even the most disciplined people need moments of freedom. The reading shows a new energy entering your life, an energy that says it is time to live too, not just build, not just plan, not just organize, not just achieve, live. And honestly, that may become one of the most important messages of your entire reading. The chapter closes with a powerful image. A Capricorn slowly setting down some of the emotional weight they have carried for far too long, and beginning to remember that life is not only about responsibility, it is also about joy. There is something very interesting about Capricorn that most people never fully understand. People often mistake your caution for coldness, your patience for distance, your silence for indifference, But honestly, the reading shows something very different. You think deeply before you move. You calculate before you leap. You analyze before you trust. And most of the time, that serves you well. The problem appears when caution slowly becomes fear, because there is a dream that continues occupying space inside your heart. Something you want, something you imagine, something you keep returning to. For some Capricorns, this is a financial goal. For others, a relationship. For others, a business, a move, a personal project, a life change. But every time this dream appears, another question appears with it. What if it doesn't work? And honestly, that question has been far more powerful than you realize, because sometimes it protects you, but other times it quietly prevents opportunities from entering your life. The reading shows something changing now. A subtle but important shift. You begin replacing one question with another. Instead of asking, what if I fail? You begin asking, what if I succeed? And honestly, that changes everything, because your energy begins moving from defense to possibility. There is another major theme appearing around finances, and this part of the reading feels extremely positive. The energy does not show lack, it shows strengthening. The reading repeatedly shows confidence growing. Not confidence that money will magically appear. Confidence in your ability to create solutions. Confidence in your ability to build. Confidence in your ability to improve your circumstances. Confidence in your ability to recover from setbacks. And honestly, that confidence becomes extremely valuable because Capricorn has always had a special relationship with achievement. You rarely believe in shortcuts. You rarely trust easy promises. You prefer construction, effort, results, proof. And the reading shows those qualities becoming strengths again. There is also something beautiful happening. You begin rediscovering talents that you have overlooked, skills that became so natural to you that you stopped noticing them, abilities that you assumed everyone possessed. And honestly, they don't. The reading repeatedly shows an important realization. Something you consider ordinary may actually be one of your greatest gifts. Read that carefully, because many Capricorns underestimate their own strengths. You do something well for so many years that it starts feeling normal. But the reading shows other people recognizing value in those abilities. Value that you may have ignored. Value that could create growth. Value that could create opportunity. There is another fascinating development. Your self-confidence begins increasing. Not loud confidence, not arrogance, not ego. Quiet confidence. The confidence of someone who finally recognizes their own capabilities, the confidence of someone who stops needing constant external validation, the confidence of someone who knows exactly what they bring to the table. And honestly, once Capricorn reaches that level of self-awareness, very little can stop them, because nobody becomes more powerful than a Capricorn who fully believes in themselves. There is also a strong message about timing. The reading shows that some opportunities are approaching. Not because luck suddenly appears, because your mindset changes, because your awareness expands, because your confidence increases. And honestly, that makes you more likely to notice opportunities that were already there. There's another beautiful lesson appearing. You do not need someone else's permission to pursue your dreams. You do not need unanimous approval. You do not need every answer. You do not need perfect certainty. You only need movement. The reading shows movement beginning, small at first, but meaningful. And honestly, those small movements create the foundation for much larger changes later. The chapter closes with a powerful image. A Capricorn standing in front of a door they once feared opening. Not because the fear disappeared, because their belief in themselves finally became stronger than the fear. There is something that Capricorns rarely admit out loud. You like certainty, not because you need to control everything, not because you want power over every situation, because security has always mattered to you, When you understand the terrain, you move confidently. When you understand the risks, you take action. When you understand the path, you commit completely. And honestly, that approach has helped you build much of what you have today. The challenge appears when life presents situations that cannot be calculated, situations that refuse to follow logic, situations that cannot be solved through planning. And few areas of life are more unpredictable than emotions. The reading shows a fascinating conflict happening inside you. Part of you wants connection, wants companionship, wants intimacy, wants to build something meaningful with someone, wants to share life instead of carrying everything alone. But another part remains cautious, observant, protective, careful. And honestly, there is a reason for that. The reading strongly suggests previous disappointments, moments where expectations were not met, moments where promises exceeded reality, moments where trust was tested, moments where someone failed to show up the way you hoped they would. And because of those experiences, a powerful emotional shield developed around your heart. Now, let me be clear. This shield is not a weakness. It protected you. It helped you survive. It helped you heal. But the reading shows an important question emerging. Is your protection still protecting you? Or is it beginning to isolate you? Because there is a very important difference between protecting your heart and locking it away. And honestly, some Capricorns are beginning to recognize that difference now. There is another beautiful energy appearing. Someone is paying attention to you, more than you realize. The reading repeatedly shows people observing you quietly, not necessarily making dramatic moves, Not necessarily expressing their feelings openly, but watching, interested, curious, trying to understand you, trying to find opportunities to connect, trying to move closer. And honestly, you may not even notice it at first, because Capricorn tends to focus on responsibilities more than romantic signals. But the energy here is strong, very strong. The reading shows opportunities for connection appearing through unexpected circumstances, unexpected conversations, unexpected meetings, unexpected invitations, situations that begin casually, naturally, without pressure, without expectations. And honestly, those are often the connections that grow the strongest. There is another word that appears repeatedly throughout this section: surprise. But not unpleasant surprises, beautiful surprises, the kind that happen when life moves outside your carefully prepared plans, because Capricorn often prefers structure, schedules, strategies, predictability. Yet many of the best experiences of your life arrived unexpectedly, and the reading suggests more of those moments approaching. There is also a major shift happening around happiness. This is important, because for a long time, part of you believed that happiness existed after achievement. After success, after stability, after every problem was solved, after every responsibility was handled, after everything was under control. But now something changes. The reading repeatedly shows you realizing that happiness is not reserved for the finish line. It exists during the journey too. A peaceful afternoon, a meaningful conversation, a spontaneous invitation, a simple moment, a shared laugh, a beautiful memory. And honestly, you need more of those moments, not later, now. Because life is not only something you build for the future, life is also something you experience in the present. The chapter closes with a powerful image: a Capricorn standing between caution and possibility, between protection and connection, between planning and spontaneity. And for the first time in a while, choosing to leave a little room for surprise. There is one word that continues appearing throughout your reading, deserving. And honestly, that word carries much more weight than it initially seems. Because for most of your life, you have been focused on responsibility, on achievement, on building, on solving problems, on reaching goals, on carrying obligations. And somewhere along the way, you became so focused on what still needed to be done that you forgot to recognize everything you had already accomplished. The reading shows a pattern that many Capricorns share. You achieve one goal and immediately focus on the next one. You solve one problem and immediately begin preparing for another. You complete something important. And before celebrating, you are already planning your next move. And honestly, that mindset helped you succeed. But it also prevented you from fully appreciating your victories. Because when you constantly focus on what is missing, you lose sight of everything you have built. The reading shows a powerful realization beginning. You start recognizing your own journey, your own growth, your own resilience, your own achievements. And honestly, there are more of them than you give yourself credit for. The energy repeatedly shows someone who survived difficult seasons, someone who had to start over more than once, someone who carried responsibilities that other people never saw, someone who learned lessons the hard way, someone who became stronger through necessity. And now something changes. You begin respecting your own story. There is another beautiful energy appearing around your home environment. The reading repeatedly shows improvements connected to comfort, peace, organization, well-being. And honestly, the interesting part is that these improvements may come through small changes, not huge transformations, simple adjustments, a different routine, a reorganized space, a new habit, a new atmosphere. And somehow these small changes create a surprisingly large emotional impact because your environment affects you more than you realize. The reading shows you becoming increasingly aware of that. There is another very important message emerging, and this one is deeply personal. Who is taking care of you? Read that carefully, because the reading shows a Capricorn who has spent years taking care of other people, supporting them, guiding them, helping them, protecting them, solving problems for them, being available for them. And honestly, you have done this beautifully. But now the universe asks a different question. Who is supporting you? Who is helping you? Who is checking on your well-being? Who is making sure your needs are met? Because there is a difference between generosity and self-neglect. And the reading suggests that some Capricorns have crossed that line without realizing it. Now something begins changing. You start paying attention to yourself, your energy, your happiness, your needs, your limits. And honestly, that is not selfish. It is healthy. There is another major transformation happening. You become more selective, not colder, not distant, selective. You begin recognizing that your time has value, your attention has value, your energy has value. And not everyone deserves unlimited access to those things. The reading shows you becoming more intentional about who you allow into your personal world, who you trust, who you invest in, who you share your plans with. And honestly, that creates peace, because not every person deserves front row access to your life. There is another beautiful indication involving someone you care deeply about. The reading shows this person becoming more stable, more secure, more confident, more capable. And honestly, watching them grow brings enormous happiness, because one of Capricorn's greatest joys is not only succeeding personally, it is seeing loved ones succeed too. Seeing people you care about find their footing, find their purpose, find their direction. And the reading suggests exactly that energy unfolding. The chapter closes with a powerful image, a Capricorn slowly realizing that strength is not only about carrying responsibility, it is also about allowing yourself to receive support, allowing yourself to rest, allowing yourself to enjoy what you have built. And honestly, that lesson changes everything. There is a situation appearing very strongly in your reading now, and honestly, it revolves around boundaries, not the boundaries life imposes, the boundaries you need to establish yourself, because there is someone around you who has gradually begun asking for more than they should, more of your time, more of your energy, more of your patience, more of your attention, more of your resources. And the difficult part is this: it did not happen all at once. It happened little by little. One request became another, one favor became another, one responsibility became another, until suddenly you found yourself carrying far more than you originally intended. And honestly, this happens often with Capricorn, because despite your serious reputation, you are far more generous than most people realize. You help, you support, you solve problems, you step in when others struggle. You become the reliable person everyone turns to. And honestly, that is a beautiful quality. But the reading shows an important realization emerging. Some people become so accustomed to receiving help that they begin treating it as an obligation. And that creates imbalance. Because helping someone is one thing, carrying them indefinitely is something completely different. The reading shows you becoming increasingly aware of this distinction. Not angry, not resentful, simply aware. And honestly, awareness changes everything. There is a strong possibility that this energy involves someone you deeply care about. A child, a family member, a close friend, someone you have protected for a long time, someone whose well-being genuinely matters to you. But the spiritual lesson remains the same. Love and responsibility must walk together. Because when you solve every problem for someone, you accidentally prevent them from learning certain lessons themselves. And honestly, you are beginning to understand that. The reading shows a healthier balance emerging. You continue supporting, you continue caring, you continue encouraging, but you stop carrying responsibilities that do not belong to you. And honestly, that creates freedom for both people. There is another powerful theme appearing around work. And this part of the reading feels incredibly positive because something changes in the way you see your own abilities. The reading repeatedly shows talents becoming visible, skills becoming recognized, strengths becoming obvious. Things you once considered ordinary suddenly appear valuable. And honestly, this realization is overdue because Capricorns often underestimate themselves. You look at a skill you've practiced for years and think, everyone can do this. But the truth is different. Most people cannot. The reading repeatedly shows you recognizing value in things you once overlooked. And that recognition creates confidence, real confidence. Not ego, not arrogance, confidence based on evidence, based on results, based on experience. And honestly, that is the strongest kind of confidence. There is also a beautiful energy connected to professional growth. For some Capricorns, this appears through financial improvement, recognition, a new opportunity, a promotion, a successful project, a stronger position, new responsibilities, new clients, new possibilities. But regardless of how it appears, the message remains the same. Growth is happening. And honestly, you have earned it. The reading repeatedly shows effort finally beginning to produce visible results. Not instant success, not overnight transformation. Progress, steady progress, the kind that lasts, the kind that creates foundations, the kind that supports long-term prosperity. There is another fascinating shift happening. Your vision of the future becomes clearer. For a long time, there may have been uncertainty, questions, doubts, a feeling that the next step was difficult to see. But now something changes. The fog begins lifting, little by little. And honestly, that clarity restores something very important. Confidence. Because when Capricorn can see a direction, nothing stops them. When Capricorn sees possibility, they build. When Capricorn sees a path, they walk it relentlessly. And the reading shows exactly that happening. The chapter closes with a powerful image, a Capricorn standing on solid ground, more aware of their value, more aware of their abilities, more aware of their future, and perhaps for the first time in a long while, believing that the life they want is not only possible, it is already beginning to take shape. There is something changing inside you now, and honestly, it is much bigger than it appears on the surface, because for a long time, you have been operating from responsibility, doing what needed to be done, handling what needed to be handled, solving what needed to be solved, carrying what needed to be carried. And while that made you stronger, it also made life feel heavier than it should have. The reading shows something beautiful beginning to happen. You start trusting yourself more, not because someone finally gave you permission, not because someone finally validated you, because you begin seeing evidence with your own eyes, evidence of your growth, evidence of your capability, evidence of your resilience, evidence that you have already overcome things you once believed were impossible. And honestly, that realization creates a completely different kind of confidence. Not borrowed confidence, not temporary confidence, real confidence, the kind that comes from experience, the kind that nobody can take away from you. There is another powerful energy appearing around your professional life. The reading repeatedly shows opportunities becoming visible, not necessarily because they suddenly appeared, because your perception changed. You begin recognizing value where you once saw routine, potential where you once saw ordinary situations, possibility where you once saw limitations. And honestly, that shift is extremely important because many opportunities enter our lives quietly, without announcements, without guarantees, without certainty. The reading shows one of these opportunities approaching now: a conversation, an offer, a project, a partnership, an idea, something that initially seems small but carries far more potential than it first appears. The spiritual message is clear: pay attention. Because the next step forward may arrive disguised as something simple. There is another fascinating theme emerging: recognition. Real recognition, not empty compliments, not praise given out of politeness, genuine recognition. The kind that comes when someone sees the quality of your work, the quality of your effort, the quality of your character. And honestly, you deserve it. Because the reading repeatedly shows years of discipline, years of consistency, years of responsibility, years of persistence, the kind of effort that often goes unnoticed while it is happening, but eventually becomes impossible to ignore. There is also a beautiful shift happening around your daily habits. The reading shows increasing attention toward balance, not perfection. Balance, better routines, better rest, better energy management, better boundaries, better self-care, and honestly, these small adjustments create enormous results because Capricorn often tries to solve large problems while ignoring small improvements. Now something changes. You begin appreciating the power of consistency, the power of small daily choices, the power of sustainable progress. And that becomes one of your greatest advantages. There is another strong indication involving pride. Healthy pride, not arrogance, not ego. The quiet pride of someone who can finally look at their journey and say, I made it through. I learned. I survived. I grew. And honestly, that pride is deserved because many people only see where you are now. They do not see everything it took to get here, the sacrifices, the setbacks, the uncertainty, the responsibilities, the difficult decisions, the moments where you continued moving forward despite having every reason to stop. And the reading shows those efforts beginning to matter, beginning to pay off, beginning to create results. There is another beautiful prediction appearing. A path becomes clearer. Not every detail, not every answer, but enough clarity to move forward confidently, enough direction to restore momentum, enough certainty to reduce anxiety. And honestly, that may be exactly what you need, because once Capricorn can clearly see the road ahead, very little can prevent them from reaching their destination. The chapter closes with a powerful image, a Capricorn standing at the beginning of a road that finally feels aligned with their future. Not walking blindly, not walking fearfully, walking confidently, because for the first time in a long while, you are beginning to trust not only the path ahead, but yourself. There is something very important happening now, And honestly, it has nothing to do with luck, nothing to do with coincidence, nothing to do with chance, It has everything to do with trust, More specifically, trusting your own ability to build the future you want. Because for a long time, you worked without guarantees. You moved forward without certainty. You continued building even when results were not immediately visible. And honestly, that may be one of the greatest demonstrations of strength in your entire life, because many people work hard when they feel motivated. Many people stay focused when things are going well. Many people remain committed when success feels close. But Capricorn, you keep going even when motivation disappears, even when progress feels slow, even when nobody is applauding, even when nobody sees the effort. And the reading shows that this consistency is beginning to pay off. There is a powerful shift occurring around your professional life. The reading repeatedly shows you becoming more aware of opportunities that previously escaped your attention. Not because they were hidden, because your perspective has evolved. You notice details differently. You evaluate possibilities differently. You recognize value differently. And honestly, this changes everything, because opportunity rarely arrives wearing a sign that says, "This will change your life." More often, it arrives disguised as something ordinary. A conversation, a suggestion, a new contact, a simple idea, a small project, something that initially appears insignificant, but later proves to be incredibly important. The spiritual message here is clear. Do not underestimate what you already know, because the reading repeatedly highlights something fascinating. You possess skills that feel normal to you, skills you've had for years, skills you've used so often that they no longer seem special. But honestly, they are. And other people see that. The reading shows value emerging from abilities that you have overlooked. Abilities that could create growth, recognition, income, influence, or entirely new opportunities. There is another beautiful theme appearing. Recognition. Not superficial recognition. Real recognition. The kind that comes when someone genuinely understands your worth. The reading shows people beginning to acknowledge what you bring to the table, your reliability, your intelligence, your discipline, your expertise, your ability to solve problems. And honestly, this feels different because it comes from merit, not popularity, not appearance, not luck, merit. And Capricorn appreciates that more than almost anything. There is also a strong indication involving lifestyle improvements. The reading shows subtle changes creating major benefits. Better routines, better organization, better sleep, better boundaries, better self-care. And honestly, the results become noticeable quickly. Because there is a truth the reading keeps repeating. Nobody can build a strong future while constantly operating from exhaustion. You understand work, you understand commitment, you understand responsibility, but now life is teaching balance. And honestly, balance may become your secret advantage. There is another fascinating realization emerging. You begin feeling proud of yourself, not arrogantly, not publicly, quietly, internally. The kind of pride that comes from looking back and realizing, I survived things that should have broken me. I learned things nobody taught me. I built things that once seemed impossible. And honestly, that realization is powerful, because confidence grows strongest when it comes from personal evidence, not outside validation. The reading repeatedly shows you becoming more certain of your own capabilities, more certain of your future, more certain of your value. There is another beautiful prediction appearing. The road ahead becomes clearer, not perfectly clear, but clearer. Enough clarity to create momentum, enough direction to reduce doubt, enough vision to move forward confidently. And honestly, that may be exactly what you've been waiting for. The chapter closes with a powerful image. A Capricorn standing at the edge of a new chapter, no longer questioning whether success is possible, no longer wondering whether growth will happen, instead, beginning to see proof that it already is. There is a very powerful transformation taking place inside you now, Dot. And honestly, most people around you will not recognize it immediately, Dot, because from the outside, you still appear like the same Capricorn, Dot, responsible, Dot, focused, reliable, disciplined. But internally, something profound is changing. The reading repeatedly shows you becoming more willing to trust yourself, not blindly, not recklessly, wisely. The kind of trust that comes from experience. The kind of trust that comes from surviving difficult chapters. The kind of trust that comes from proving your strength to yourself over and over again. And honestly, that changes everything. Because there was a time when uncertainty felt overwhelming, when the future felt difficult to read, when every major decision seemed to carry enormous pressure. But now something shifts. You begin realizing that even when you didn't have all the answers, you still found your way. Even when you didn't have guarantees, you still kept moving. Even when life became complicated, you still adapted. And honestly, that realization becomes one of your greatest sources of confidence. There is another major theme appearing: self-worth. Not self-worth based on achievements, not self-worth based on income, not self-worth based on other people's approval. True self-worth. The reading shows you recognizing your value independent of external results. And that is a huge transformation because many Capricorns unconsciously tie their worth to productivity, to accomplishment, to performance, to results. But now something changes. You begin understanding that your value existed before every achievement, before every promotion, before every success, before every accomplishment. And honestly, that realization creates freedom. There is also a very strong energy surrounding relationships, not necessarily romantic relationships alone, all relationships. The reading shows you becoming increasingly selective, not because you are becoming cold, because you are becoming conscious. You begin noticing who supports your growth, who genuinely celebrates your victories, who respects your boundaries, who values your presence. And honestly, those observations influence important decisions because the reading repeatedly shows Capricorn protecting their energy more carefully, protecting their peace more intentionally, protecting their future more strategically. There is another fascinating prediction involving unexpected opportunities. Something appears that was not part of your original plan. A conversation, a proposal, a connection, a possibility. And honestly, your first reaction may be skepticism because Capricorn prefers certainty, prefers evidence, prefers structure, but the reading encourages openness, not blind trust. Open-mindedness, because some of the most important chapters of your life began as unexpected opportunities, and the same energy appears here. There is also a beautiful message about happiness. The reading shows you slowly abandoning the belief that happiness must always wait. Wait until everything is finished. Wait until every problem is solved. Wait until every goal is reached. Wait until life is completely organized. And honestly, that day never fully arrives because life is always evolving, always changing, always presenting new challenges. Now you begin understanding something important. Joy belongs in the journey too, not only at the destination. And honestly, that lesson may change your entire relationship with life. There is another strong indication involving someone who admires you, someone who respects your strength, your consistency, your intelligence, your ability to remain calm when others become overwhelmed. This person may never say everything they feel, but the admiration is real, and the reading suggests this connection becomes more important as time passes. The chapter closes with a powerful image, a Capricorn slowly releasing the pressure to control every outcome, not becoming careless, not becoming passive, simply trusting that their experience, wisdom, and resilience are enough. And honestly, they are. As this cycle begins approaching its conclusion, the reading reveals something extremely important. And honestly, it may be one of the most liberating realizations you have experienced in years, because for a very long time, you have carried far more weight than anyone realized. Responsibilities, expectations, obligations. Worries, plans, problems, and while you carried them with strength, you carried them nonetheless. The reading repeatedly shows an image of someone walking with a heavy backpack, not because life forced them to carry everything, because they believed they had to, because Capricorn often becomes the responsible one, the dependable one, the problem solver, the person everyone turns to, the person everyone counts on. And honestly, you have fulfilled that role beautifully. But now something changes. The reading shows you beginning to understand a powerful truth. Being strong does not mean carrying everything alone. Read that again, because this lesson appears repeatedly. You can be responsible without becoming overwhelmed. You can be supportive without becoming exhausted. You can be dependable without sacrificing your own well-being. And honestly, that realization creates enormous freedom. There is another beautiful development appearing around partnership, not necessarily romantic partnership, life partnership, support, cooperation, mutual effort. The reading shows people entering your life who genuinely want to contribute, people who want to help, people who want to participate, people who want to walk beside you instead of standing behind you waiting for solutions. And honestly, this feels refreshing because you are finally learning that not every burden belongs solely to you. There is another powerful energy surrounding your emotional world. Despite every disappointment, despite every setback, despite every reason to become cynical, your heart remains open, careful, protected, selective, but open. And honestly, that is beautiful because many people experience heartbreak and choose permanent closure. They stop believing, they stop trusting, they stop hoping. But the reading shows something different in you, a quiet willingness to believe again, perhaps more cautiously than before, perhaps more wisely than before, but still willing. And honestly, that willingness becomes very important because there is a strong indication that positive surprises are approaching. Not necessarily dramatic surprises, meaningful ones. The kind that arrive quietly, a new opportunity, a new connection, a new direction, a new chapter, something that once seemed distant beginning to move closer. And honestly, you may not see it coming. Because Capricorn often focuses so intensely on long-term plans that unexpected blessings can arrive unnoticed at first. The reading repeatedly shows movement, forward movement, progress, momentum, answers arriving. Situations improving, possibilities expanding. There is another fascinating realization emerging. You begin listening to your own voice more than outside opinions. This is important because for years you have heard advice, criticism, expectations, predictions, opinions, instructions, and honestly, some of them were useful, some were not. But now something shifts. You begin trusting your own judgment more, your own instincts more, your own vision more, and that changes your decisions. Because once Capricorn becomes aligned with their own truth, everything becomes simpler, the path becomes clearer, the priorities become clearer, the relationships become clearer, the future becomes clearer. There is also a strong indication of emotional fulfillment appearing, not instant fulfillment. Earned fulfillment, the kind that comes from looking back and realizing, I built this, I created this, I survived for this, I worked for this. And honestly, few things bring more satisfaction to Capricorn than seeing tangible proof that effort was worthwhile. The reading suggests that proof is beginning to appear, little by little, step by step, but undeniably. The chapter closes with a powerful image. A Capricorn standing at the edge of a new season, no longer focused only on survival, no longer focused only on responsibility, no longer focused only on carrying burdens. Instead, beginning to focus on possibility, on happiness, on fulfillment, on the life they genuinely want to create. And honestly, that changes everything. As this reading comes to its conclusion, there is one final image that appears with extraordinary clarity. And honestly, it may be the most important message of your entire reading. Because after all the responsibilities, all the planning, all the sacrifices, all the lessons, all the effort, life is asking you a simple question. When will you allow yourself to truly live? The reading shows a Capricorn who spent years preparing for stability, preparing for security, preparing for success, preparing for the future, preparing for the next challenge, preparing for the next responsibility. And honestly, preparation became a way of life, a useful way of life, a productive way of life. But now something changes, because there comes a moment when preparation must become action, a moment when building must become living, a moment when planning must become experiencing. And the reading strongly suggests that you are entering exactly that chapter. There is a beautiful realization emerging. You no longer need to prove your worth. Read that again. Because this lesson appears repeatedly throughout the final chapter. You do not need to constantly demonstrate your value. You do not need to earn the right to rest. You do not need to justify every dream. You do not need to explain every ambition. You do not need to convince people who refuse to understand your journey. Because the truth is simple. Your life already contains proof. Proof of resilience, proof of growth, proof of intelligence, proof of discipline, proof of character. And honestly, the people who matter already see it. There is another powerful theme appearing. Harvest, not instant rewards, not overnight success. Harvest. The reading repeatedly shows seeds you planted beginning to produce results. Efforts that once seemed invisible becoming visible. Work that once felt unnoticed becoming recognized. Dreams that once felt distant moving closer. And honestly, this feels deserved because Capricorn rarely expects something for nothing. You believe in earning, building, creating, working. And the energy surrounding this chapter feels exactly like that. Not luck, results. There is also a beautiful shift happening in your emotional world. Despite every disappointment, despite every setback, despite every reason to become guarded forever, your heart remains alive. Hope remains alive. Possibility remains alive. And honestly, that may be one of your greatest strengths. Because the reading shows someone who never completely gave up on life. Perhaps you became more cautious. Perhaps you became more selective. Perhaps you became more protective. But you never completely stopped believing. And that belief becomes very important because there is a strong indication that positive surprises are approaching. A conversation, an opportunity, a connection, a breakthrough, a new direction. Something that reminds you why hope was worth holding on to. There is another beautiful realization appearing. You begin listening to yourself more than the noise around you, more than criticism, more than expectations, more than pressure, more than fear. And honestly, that changes your entire path. Because once Capricorn trusts their own wisdom, decisions become easier, relationships become clearer, priorities become stronger, the future becomes brighter. The reading also shows a powerful sense of accomplishment developing over the months ahead. Not because everything becomes perfect, because you begin recognizing how much you have already built, how much you have already survived, how much you have already achieved. And honestly, that recognition is overdue. Because your confidence was never supposed to come from comparison. It was supposed to come from experience. And your experience has already proven how capable you are. The final image surrounding your reading is beautiful. A Capricorn standing at the top of a mountain they spent years climbing, looking back at the road behind them, looking ahead at the horizon before them, and realizing something powerful. The future is no longer something to fear. It is something to welcome. Because the person standing here now is stronger, wiser, more confident, more selective, more balanced, and far more prepared for happiness than they realize. The universe is not asking you to carry more weight. It is asking you to enjoy what you have built, to trust what you have learned, to embrace what is coming, and perhaps most importantly, to stop merely surviving and start truly living. Because the next chapter of your life is not about proving yourself. It is about becoming everything you worked so hard to become. Capricorn.